Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about American politics, and we're going to talk about how much Hollywood is willing to pay, how much Hollywood is willing to sacrifice for their narrative. All right, so let's talk about the element of what their narrative is right now. And so Hollywood has a lot of strong messages to America, and one of them is the macro man and the macro woman are the same. Okay, now we do need to be careful with language here, right? So I agree with, excuse me, you can find a woman who's really just like a man, and you could find a man who's really just like a woman. That overlap does happen. There's exceptions to every rule, right? And so there are men who almost all of their behavior and all of their patterns would look like that of a woman, and there are absolutely women who almost all their behavior and all their patterns look exactly like a man, right? That happens. That's not up for debate. What Hollywood has been saying for a while is that the macro man and the macro woman are the same. Okay, now what does that mean? They're saying at the 51% level, if you take 51% of men in America and 51% of women in America, there's no functional difference, right? And they've been singing this for a long, long time, right? Decades, right? And there's good reason, right? Overall, there has, a while ago, there was this idea of a family. Two people got together, they had kids, and they had roles. And those roles were gendered, and they would, follow along with them, right? And Hollywood's like, hey, we want everybody to have every option, right? Which I get that. Like, it makes sense, right? You don't want anybody to feel like they're on the outs, right? And so in order to achieve that, they began to craft these narratives, right? And the narratives would change. And I think there's a point where this very strong narrative came out that the macro man and the macro American man and the macro American woman are the same. There's no functional difference between them, right? Like, men don't like Gladiator and Wicked. Who knows who's going to go see which? Well, the reality is everybody knew which, like the numbers went exactly the way. You could not buy a Vegas line on it, right? Everybody knew men were going to go see Gladiator 2, women were going to go see Wicked. That's exactly what happened. The numbers bore it out, right? Because the macro man and the macro woman are not the same, right? But this narrative is important to Hollywood. And what we're going to talk about today is how much they are willing to burn, how much they are willing to lose, how much they are willing to sacrifice to get this done, right? To continue to say this powerfully, illustrate it, say it, never stop saying it, say it again, repeat it, jam it down the throat, say it again, repeat it. It is astonishing. All right. So where did we see this? So I went and saw the movie, The Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. There was no world in which I didn't see this movie. I like anime. I'm a huge fan of the Star Blazers television show, and I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. And I got the receipts for that, right? You'll see that right here on this channel. You see me talking about both of those topics on this channel over the coming up on 9,000 videos I have, right? So not an exaggeration. That's actually the number, right? Like, it's pretty amazing, in my humble opinion, right? Okay, so you have all this happening, right? And so Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. Now, first of all, what was this movie? This movie was a very big freaking deal. A very big freaking deal, right? So first of all, this is Lord of the Rings, okay? Now, why is that a big deal? Every single one of Peter Jackson's 6 Lord of the Rings films made between 700 million and a billion and $1.1 billion, right? If you average them out, it's essentially $1 billion per film. And this is why the bankers, did you know they hired Guillermo del Toro? He did a whole bunch of work. They paid him millions and millions of dollars to work on the film. And the bankers were like, fire that guy. I know he has an Oscar. I know he's a brilliant artist. We don't care. Peter Jackson's a guaranteed billion per film. Go get Peter Jackson. And they did. They backed up dump trucks of money to get him for the Hobbit. He didn't want to do the Hobbit, right? And they're like, we don't care. Like, you're going to make hundreds of millions. We're going to make hundreds. We're going to make billions, right? Get back in the saddle, right? And that's what happened, right? And so the point is, if you do the Lord of the Rings right, it's hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion per film. Okay, so there were hundreds of millions of dollars on the line for this film, for the creators of the film, for the Lord of the Rings estate, right? And get this, all right? This was a brilliant concept. It was like, hey, let's take existing intellectual properties and do an anime cover of them, right? Like, we'll do an anime iteration, not a cover, right? An anime iteration, another story, right? With its own lore, with its own narrative, with a unique narrative, not just a copy of an existing live action, right? But let's give a real narrative, a unique, separate, distinct narrative, okay? And it's going to be anime. Now, why is that a big deal? That is a big freaking deal, right? Right now, there's a lot of gaps, right? It's really hard to get people to go to the movies, right? But young people love anime. Old people love existing intellectual property. Young people don't. They don't care about existing intellectual property. They're like, give me another 1-minute TikTok that has no narrative. I don't care about intellectual property. I want to laugh. I want to feel something. I want to see somebody dance, right? They do not care about intellectual property. Young people do not care about intellectual property. But young people do care about anime. So this could have bridged the gap, right? And if this movie had worked, right, I could have seen an anime Fast and Furious film, an anime Star Wars film, an anime Warhammer film, what's another intellectual property that's strong and out there and moving? An anime Star Trek film, like in the movies. There was so much at stake here. Hundreds of millions. Billions if this thing succeeds and gets sequels. Billions, right? That's a lot of money, right? So how did they cock it up? How did they make sure that this made dirt money, right? So first of all, the War of the Rohirrim had a $5 million domestic opening. $5 million. It didn't even make $5 million. It made $4.6 million. Do you understand that? Do you understand how bad that is? Right? This is on an intellectual property that said, hey, for us, $1 billion is a layup. $1 billion is a layup. $1 billion is a layup. This couldn't even make $5 million domestic on its opening weekend, right? It did abominably. No young people, no old people, no anime fans, no Loader fans. Nobody would touch this with a 10-foot pole. No one, right? 4.6 million. Like the director's mom and him went to see this, and me. That's it. It was astonishing, right? It was absolutely astonishing how bad this did. Now, why? Well, here's the message, right? What is the message? I saw it. I saw the movie. I can tell you what the message is. Hey, everybody, listen up. Listen up. Here's the message. Princess. What does princess mean? Let's define the term princess. And we need to say it to you again. You've seen it in other movies, but you need to hear it again. What's a princess? A princess is a woman who refuses to wear a dress. A princess is a woman who complains that she's noble. A princess is a woman who doesn't want to marry that guy and doesn't want to marry any guy. A princess is a woman who wants to sweep the floor, right? Doesn't want to go to a highfalutin tea party in a nice dress. She wants to help the working staff. That's a princess. That's a princess. That's a princess. That's a princess. Let's tell you again. You've seen it in every movie for the last 5 years. It's like, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? It's everywhere, right? Do you know what a princess is? Yes, I know what a princess is. Princess is a woman who really despises the beautiful dress she's in, really doesn't want to be noble, really doesn't want to marry that guy or any guy. And every single checkbox I just said is in this film, okay? Gets worse, right? Hey, everybody, we need you to understand about women in combat. Here we go. Let's explain to women in combat. So first of all, if you're a man and you have armor, weapons, training, muscle, weight, none of that will help you. You will suck at combat. But if you're a woman and you weigh 120 pounds and you have no weapons and no armor and virtually no training, maybe you swung a wooden sword around when you were 4, right? Then you're going to win every combat, right? Like, what you really need to win combat is you need to be a woman. You need to weigh 120 pounds. You need to have no weapons, no armor. Let's not get any training in there. None of those things are helpful in combat. Unarmored, unweaponed, untrained, 120-pound women always beat 180-pound armed, armored, trained soldiers, male soldiers. Always, always, always. Right? You're like, you're just like, and so this is the message, right? It's the macro man and the macro woman are the same. Men suck at combat and women rock at combat with no resources. Men with all resources suck at combat. Women with no resources are just the best at combat and will always best a man who's had hundreds or even 1,000 hours of training, has the best possible weapons, the best possible armor, muscle that's been made for years, right? Scars and experience. None of that will help them win in any way, right? And you're like, wait. Did we really need this in Lord of the Rings War of Rohirrim? And they're like, yes, of course you needed this in Lord of the Rings War of Rohirrim. How could you not possibly need this lesson again? We only gave it to you in the last 2 Lord of the Rings Rings of Power with Galadriel in 8 episodes each. You've only seen this 16 times in the last 2 years, right? You need to see this again, right? And then Hollywood's like, well, there's kind of like some clues that people don't want to see this, right? Remember when we emasculated Joker and said, hey, everybody, what if Harley Quinn's way cooler than Joker, right? And they were like, well, nobody went to see that movie. It was like it was one of the most shocking failures in all of Hollywood ever. Well, it's important we get this message out there again. If we do this movie right, there's probably 250 million, maybe 750 million in it for us. If we do this movie right, there's probably 2.5 billion or 7.5 billion, because we got old people and young people to go to the theaters, and we could do this across every intellectual property. Hey, there's all that money to make, but why make that money? Why don't we just burn it in a hole? Why don't we just burn it in a hole? So that we can say the same message we've said in 15 movies this year. Wink, wink. And you're like, it is astonishing. Like, and at this point, it is truly astonishing how much they're willing to sacrifice to say this message again, right? And so at that point, when they're saying this message again, right, and okay, so here's the thing. Independent women, that's a good thing. Women should have the right to be independent. And I think what I'm saying is, I don't want there to be movies where there aren't independent women, right? I would like to see independent women in film. What you don't need to do that is you could say, hey, women can do this too. You don't have to say men suck. That's the part where I think men like me, macro men, right, the 51% man is saying, hey, okay, I get you want to show an independent woman. Do you have to show that men suck? Like, can't you just say, hey, women are cool too, right? And they're like, no, you need to understand that women are up and men are down. And we're like, hey, a lot of men are like dying deaths of despair. Maybe this message could relent for a little bit. No, we're willing to sacrifice billions to say this again. Billions. Hundreds of millions at minimum. Like, who needs money, right? And you're like, don't you guys need money? Like, I need money. Where are you coming at this from? Like, it's just, this is a guaranteed loser film, right? Like, because it was written to say women up, men down. And I'm just gonna say this, Hollywood, man, women up, men up. That's the formula, okay? Not women up, men down, right? This movie was abominable. It was an abominable film. And it astonishes me how much Hollywood is willing to burn to say this ridiculous trope message again, right? This has got to stop. This has got to stop. Women up, men up, right? That's the formula. And I don't think it's that complicated, right? And the receipts are in. You cannot continue to do this. Men are not going to continue to go see films where they're insulted, except me. I continue to do it. There's no world in which I didn't see an animated Lord of the Rings movie, right? But the rest of the guys were like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to skip that," right? And they did in droves, right? And here's a good question: why did the women skip this? That's really fascinating. Even the women were like, "I don't need that." Well, why would a woman say, "I don't need to see your Rebel Princess movie where a 128-pound woman with no armor, with no weapons, no armor, no training, no weight, no muscle, no scars, beats every guy with weapon, armor, training, weight, muscle, and scars"? They can skip this. Why shouldn't they skip it? When would they? How long would they have to wait to see another one? John Wick. We'll just wait for the John Wick 5. I'm sure that'll star a rebel princess who doesn't want to wear a dress, doesn't want to be noble, doesn't want to marry that guy or any guy. They literally said that in order to. I don't want to marry you. I don't want to marry any guy. Right? Like, oh my gosh, exasperated sigh. Oh my goodness, right? Like, and because you could get away with this 20 years ago, but at this point, it's just, can't we just put a big stamp like, boom, Rebel Princess, right? And not have to go through all of it in the film? Or like, it's just like, it's astonishing. And you're like, maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger make another action film. I'm sure it'll star a 120-pound woman who defeats all the men, right? Like, I don't need to wait more than 5 minutes. If I skip this one, there'll be another one on the train very shortly. It's absolutely astonishing, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. And my exasperation. Hollywood, please, just women up, men up. That should be the formula. It doesn't need to be women up, men down, right? Like, men are literally dying over this. Can we stop? Can we please? I'm begging you, please stop, right? Like, stop burning money in a hole. Stop insulting men. Stop adding to deaths of despair. This is part of this is part of it. Like, it is developing a hopelessness in American men that is at a new level. Every single word of that, every single word you've heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing and have a fetch millennium.